My beloved brothers and sisters, sometimes just when it seems like people are finally starting to notice you, just when you think your time has come, Allah quietly pulls you away. And it confuses you. It hurts. But He didn't pull you away to punish you. He pulled you away because He saw something deeper. He saw a version of you the world wasn't ready to touch. So He hid you, not to break you, but to protect a miracle He's still perfecting inside of you. Because before Allah reveals a soul to the world, He purifies it in silence. And if He isolated you, it means what He's preparing is greater than what you were reaching for. Because you were becoming dependent on the applause, not the one who gave you the gift. You were finally stepping into the light. Things were starting to move. People were clapping, mentioning your name, praising your efforts. And deep down, something in your heart felt warm again. It felt like you were finally being seen, finally being valued, finally being appreciated for who you are. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's human to enjoy kindness. It's natural to feel good when someone believes in you. But here's where it quietly became dangerous. Without realizing it, you started measuring your worth through their words. You started checking your heart through their reactions. When they smiled, you smiled. When they disappeared, your confidence dropped. You stopped asking, what does Allah think of me? And started asking, are they still impressed with me? You weren't doing it on purpose. You didn't wake up and say, let me worship their praise. No. But slowly, your self-worth began to depend on the applause. You were being fed by compliments, addicted to attention, waiting for likes, for mentions, for validation, just to feel like you're doing okay. And if Allah had let that continue, you would have become a prisoner, not in chains, but in people's opinions. So in His mercy, He stepped in. He turned off the noise. He let the stage go quiet. The claps faded. The attention died down. And suddenly, you were alone again. You panicked, didn't you? You thought, did I do something wrong? Why did everyone disappear just when things were getting better? But what if I told you, they didn't leave you, Allah removed them, not to hurt you, but to save you from building your identity on something that can vanish overnight. Because the truth is, if your self-worth comes from being seen, then being unseen will destroy you. But if your worth comes from being loved by Allah, then even in silence you'll feel secure. Allah didn't want your heart to be owned by people's reactions. He didn't want your happiness to rise and fall with someone else's opinion. He wanted you to be free. So He pulled you back. He hid you, not from the world, but from your attachment to the world. And in that isolation, you remembered something you had forgotten. That even when no one sees you, Allah does. Even when no one claps for you, the angels still record your efforts. Even when you're not mentioned by others, you are still known by the most merciful. Now think about it. Would you really want to depend on people to feel seen? On likes that fade? On praise that changes? On voices that love you one day and forget you the next? Allah said, no, my servant, come back to me. Let me teach you how to walk without begging to be noticed. Because when your heart becomes full of Allah, you stop needing attention. You stop chasing applause. You stop asking the world for permission to feel valuable. And that, dear soul, is true freedom. That is the kind of heart that can walk into any room, be loved or be ignored, praised or forgotten, and still say, I am enough because Allah is with me. So the next time you wonder why it went quiet, why the people stopped clapping, why you were suddenly pulled back after being seen, remember, it wasn't rejection. It was protection. It wasn't punishment. It was purification. Allah was breaking your dependency on the temporary to root your soul in the eternal. Because when the time comes and He allows you to rise again, this time you'll rise for Him, not for them. And that's a rise no one can ever take away from you. Because the version of you that was rising still carried scars you were trying to hide. You thought you were ready. You really did. You looked in the mirror and said to yourself, I've come so far, I've healed enough, I'm ready to be seen now. And in many ways you were growing, you were trying, you were pulling yourself out of things that once drowned you. You were learning how to smile again, even with a shaky heart. But deep inside, there were still wounds you never talked about. Emotional cuts you had covered with strength. Grief you buried under goals. Pain that you didn't want anyone to see, not even yourself. Because if you look too closely, you were scared those emotions might break you all over again. So instead, you tried to rise anyway. You dressed the part. You spoke with confidence. You did everything right in front of people, but in private, you still struggled to sleep at night. You still fought memories that came out of nowhere. You still carried sadness in your chest that had no words. And Allah knew, even when you didn't say a word, He saw how heavy your smile was. He saw how much effort it took just to get through the day. He saw the parts of you that still whispered, I hope no one finds out I'm not as okay as I look. That's why He didn't let the spotlight stay on. That's why He isolated you. Not because you were a failure, not because you weren't good enough, but because your soul was still healing in secret. And the rise would have only added pressure to a heart that needed rest. You see, Allah never wants to elevate you while you're still pretending to be okay. He wants to raise you from a place of wholeness, not from a performance. Because when you rise while still bleeding, you start needing success to distract you from your wounds. You use praise to numb your pain. And before you know it, you're not growing anymore. You're hiding in your achievements. So Allah said, let me pull you back. Let me tend to what you're trying to ignore. Let me heal the version of you that's still crying behind closed doors. And that's what isolation became. Not punishment, but treatment. Not delay, but divine surgery. He wasn't taking away your rise. He was making sure you'd survive it when it finally came. He was cleansing the parts of you that were heavy with the past. The heartbreaks you never fully grieved. The guilt you still carried. The shame you never admitted. The loss you tried to rush through. Because Allah knows you can't carry that weight into the future. He's preparing for you. You can't walk into the light while hiding shadows inside. So He stopped everything. He paused your growth not because you weren't enough, but because He wants your peace to match your progress. He wants the public version of you to be just as healed as the private version. No cracks hiding behind your smile. No wounds bleeding behind your words. Just sincerity, just truth. Just a soul that finally feels light again. So if you felt forgotten lately, if your momentum disappeared, if the world suddenly stopped looking at you, know that it wasn't random, it was divine. You were about to carry blessings that would have suffocated you had He not paused and said, let's take care of your heart first. And when He's done, when the healing is complete, when the version of you that rises is no longer surviving, but thriving, then Allah will show you why the pause was the greatest gift of all. Because the eyes watching you were not all clean. You were finally getting noticed. Your efforts were being seen. Your name was starting to move ahead of you in rooms you never even stepped into. And you began to feel hopeful. Maybe this time you would finally be accepted, celebrated, understood. But then something changed. The energy shifted. The same people who once praised you grew silent. Some grew distant. Others began to subtly compare or compete or even copy, but no longer celebrated the very same light they once admired. And you began to ask yourself, what did I do wrong? Why is everyone pulling away when I need them the most? But the truth is, you didn't do anything wrong. Your light simply began to expose what their hearts were hiding. You see, not every person who watches you wants goodness for you. Not every smile means peace. Not every congratulation comes from sincerity. There are eyes that admire you outwardly, but hold envy inwardly. There are hearts that look calm on the surface, but tremble at the thought of you surpassing them. And Allah in His mercy saw what you couldn't. He saw the glances that lingered too long, the praises that had conditions, the hearts that clapped with one hand and plotted with the other. You were stepping into a space where people noticed you, but not all of them wished you well. And if He had let you continue in their view, they would have slowly chipped away at your peace, your clarity, and eventually your sincerity. So Allah removed you. He pulled you away, not because you weren't ready, but because they weren't safe. Because if He had let you stay in their gaze, you would have begun changing yourself to stay lovable. You would have started shrinking, performing, doubting. You would have dimmed your light, not because it wasn't beautiful, but because their jealousy would have made you question it. And that's not how Allah wants you to live. He doesn't want you to rise in front of hearts that secretly root for your fall. He doesn't want your blessings to be seen by those who carry silent harm in their intentions. He doesn't want you to constantly defend yourself, prove yourself, or wonder, what did I do to lose them? So instead, He takes you away before the damage is done, before the invisible arrows reach your heart, before the unseen negativity pollutes your soul. And yes, it hurts. You miss the attention. You feel confused. You wonder why things suddenly went cold. But that silence you're hearing now, that's Allah protecting your future. That's Him closing doors that looked open, but were actually filled with silent traps. You don't need to know who was envious. You don't need to guess who changed. Because your job isn't to manage their hearts. Your job is to protect yours. And Allah knows what you don't. He sees what your eyes can't. And His mercy is faster than any evil eye. His protection is louder than any hidden jealousy. And His removal is not rejection, it's rescue. So if you ever felt suddenly disconnected from people, platforms, opportunities, it might just be that Allah was shielding your light from eyes that didn't have the purity to witness your rise. Because not everyone watching your journey is praying for your peace. And the one who loves you most knows when it's time to pull the curtain before someone else tries to pull your soul down with their stare. Because real purpose doesn't come through attention, it comes through obedience. You thought you found your purpose because the world started noticing you. They were watching, they were cheering, and they were calling your name in places you never imagined. And in those moments, it felt like your journey was finally making sense. You believed that this being seen, being appreciated must be the purpose Allah made you for. That the eyes watching you meant you were finally doing something important. But what if I told you purpose has nothing to do with being seen by people and everything to do with being sincere with Allah? What if the place you were about to rise into would have distracted you from the one who lifted you in the first place? You see, attention is intoxicating. You don't even realize it, but it slowly starts to change how you speak, how you think, And worst of all, why you do what you do. You stop asking, is Allah pleased with this? And start wondering, will people like this? You stop focusing on truth and start performing for praise. And that's the moment when purpose begins to rot, not on the outside, but from the inside out. Allah saw your heart shifting. He saw you trying to hold on to your sincerity. But the pressure to be impressive was starting to grow louder. You were still doing good, but your reasons were starting to blur. And that's why He pulled you away. That's why the spotlight faded. That's why the platform slowed down. That's why the engagement dipped. The followers stopped. The attention vanished. It wasn't rejection. It was redirection. Because real purpose doesn't need to be impressive. It needs to be obedient. It doesn't need to trend. It needs to please the one who sees you even when no one else does. You weren't created to perform. You were created to worship. And if the rise was starting to take your heart away from Him, then what looked like success was actually a spiritual disaster in slow motion. So Allah, in His gentle mercy, stepped in. He whispered into your journey, come back to me. Not because He was angry, but because He saw you getting tired. Tired of proving yourself. Tired of curating a version of yourself. Tired of being strong in public and empty in private. And that's not what you were created for. You were created for peace in obedience, not exhaustion in performance. And here's what most people don't see. Sometimes Allah will bless your private, hidden acts of obedience more than He will ever bless your public actions that are being watched. Because when you pray alone and no one sees, when you forgive in silence, when you help someone quietly, when you cry in sujood with no camera, no audience, no caption, that's where real power lives. That's where real purpose is born. Not in the applause, but in the sincerity. So if your spotlight has disappeared, if the attention has faded, if you feel like your voice has been silenced after doing everything right, it's not the end. It's the beginning of something far more sacred. Allah is taking you from the performance of purpose to the purity of purpose. He's cleaning your heart from needing to be seen. He's realigning your focus to where it always belonged with Him. And when your obedience becomes more important than being noticed, that's when He'll let you rise again. But this time, you won't be rising for them. You'll be rising for Him. And that is a rise that never loses its reward. Because you were starting to confuse your identity with the role you were given. There's something subtle that happens to many of us. We start doing something beautiful, a job, a mission, a da'wah effort, a service to others. And over time it becomes our role, our thing. The way people know us, the way we see ourselves. And then that role grows. People start admiring it, respecting it, relying on it. And slowly, without realizing it, your heart starts to attach your worth to that role. You start thinking, this is who I am. This is why I matter. If I don't do this, then who even am I? That's how the confusion begins. Where the role becomes the identity. Where the position becomes the mirror. Where the person you were before begins to vanish underneath the person people now expect you to be. You see, Allah gave you the role as a tool, not as your definition. He gave it to serve others, not to replace your soul. But when He sees that your role is becoming your value, that your sense of self is getting tied up in how people see you, how useful you are, how much you produce, how respected you appear, then in His mercy, He takes it away. He pulls you out of it. He slows it down. He changes your path. He silences the world not to hurt you, but to reintroduce you to the part of you that was slowly getting buried beneath the title. Because your worth is not in being a leader, not in being a speaker, not in being admired, followed, or seen as wise. Your worth is in being a servant of Allah. That's it. That's always been enough. And when your heart forgets that, Allah gently reminds you. He lets the platform fall quiet. He lets the position shift. He allows the success to pause. And suddenly you find yourself sitting in a room. No one calling, no one asking, no one needing you. And that's when the real question arrives. Who am I when I'm not helping everyone? Who am I when I'm no longer being called upon? Who am I when I'm just alone with Allah, stripped of all labels? And that question, though painful, is a gift. Because some people spend their whole lives being useful to others, but never learning how to be whole within themselves. Allah doesn't want that for you. He doesn't want you to collapse the moment you're no longer in the spotlight. He doesn't want your self-esteem to fall apart when people no longer need you. He doesn't want your confidence to be tied to how many titles you hold. He wants your confidence to come from knowing who you are with Him even when no one else is around. So if you've been removed from a role, if your status shifted, if the thing that once gave you identity no longer exists, don't panic. Don't think your story is over, because maybe this is where it actually begins. You're not just the teacher. You're not just the helper. You're not just the one who's always strong. You're a soul. You're a servant. You are valuable to Allah without doing anything at all. And once you truly understand that, He may give you the role back, but this time it won't define you. It won't control you. And it won't be your identity. It will simply be a gift. And you'll carry it without fear, because your soul no longer depends on the label. That is why He isolated you, to bring you back to the truth. You are not what you do. You are who you are when no one is watching but Allah. And that, dear soul, is the only identity that lasts, because your circle was too small for the calling Allah was preparing you for. You were just about to step into something bigger, a new chapter, a higher level, a responsibility that felt heavier but sacred. You felt it deep in your chest. Something in you was shifting, something you couldn't quite explain. But just as that new beginning started to unfold, people around you started to change. Some grew distant, others became cold, and a few just disappeared without warning, without closure, without reason. You looked around, and suddenly your circle felt smaller, quieter, and more empty than you were ready for. And your heart whispered, why now? Why is Allah letting me lose people right when I'm about to rise? But what if I told you it's not that you were losing people, you were being separated from what your next chapter can't carry? You see, sometimes the calling Allah is preparing for you is far too big to fit into the comfort zone you were in. Some people in your circle only knew the old version of you, the one who stayed quiet, the one who played small, the one who made space for everyone else, but never claimed space for their own light. And now Allah is rewriting you. And the new version that's emerging, it's bolder, it's more focused, it has a mission. It no longer apologizes for being chosen. But that version won't be understood by everyone. There are some hearts that only respected you when you were struggling, only loved you when you were easy to manage, only supported you as long as you stayed beneath them. But now that you're healing, now that you're growing, now that you're being called towards something divine, they can no longer handle the light you're stepping into. So Allah, in His mercy, began removing them one by one, not to hurt you, but to protect what He's building in you. Because He knows what you don't. If they had stayed, they would have become a ceiling when you needed wings. They would have doubted you when you needed encouragement. They would have drained you when you needed to preserve energy. They would have held on to an outdated version of you while Allah was sculpting something new. And maybe you would have shrunk yourself just to keep them comfortable. Maybe you would have hesitated to say yes to your next chapter because you didn't want to outgrow those who refused to grow with you. But your soul was made for more than that. So Allah removed them first to save you the heartbreak later. He closed their doors gently so your spirit could walk freely into the ones He's opening. Yes, it hurts. Yes, you miss them. Yes, it feels unfair at times. But would you really want to carry people into your future who secretly resented your growth, who would have only supported the watered down version of you, who would have made you question whether you were too much just for stepping into what Allah had written for you? That's not love. That's not loyalty. That's limitation. And Allah never wanted your next chapter to be built on limitation. He wants it built on liberation. So if your circle feels small now, if you feel lonely right before your elevation, don't be afraid, because sometimes Allah empties the room before He reveals the assignment. Sometimes He removes the noise before He gives the instructions. And sometimes He leaves you alone. So the only voice guiding you is His. That is not abandonment. That's divine preparation. Because the next version of you, it needs clarity. It needs clean surroundings. It needs people who believe in what Allah is doing in your life even before it's visible. And until those people arrive, He will keep you alone. So nothing distracts you from the weight of what's coming. So don't be sad. You didn't lose your people. You lost what your next season couldn't carry. You didn't get left behind. You got lifted away. And very soon, you realize that the small circle you cried over was the space Allah was clearing so He could finally make room for you. Because what's coming will require a version of you that doesn't need to be seen to know your worth. There are moments in life where you start to feel invisible, like no one sees what you're doing. No one truly hears you. No one understands what's inside you. And for a while, you tolerated it. You stayed strong. You kept going. You told yourself, Allah sees me, that's enough. But over time, the silence grew louder and your soul began to ask, am I even valuable anymore? If no one sees me, if no one affirms me, if no one acknowledges my existence, do I still matter? And it's in that exact moment that Allah begins preparing you for something sacred. Because what's coming next in your life requires a version of you who doesn't need to be seen to know that you are valuable. You see, if your sense of worth is still tied to visibility, then you'll only feel important when people are clapping. You'll only feel useful when you're in motion. You'll only feel loved when you're performing. But that's not worth, that's emotional survival. And Allah wants to free you from that. So before He gives you more, He gives you quiet. He removes the audience. He silences the noise. He pulls away the recognition, the compliments, the attention, so your heart can learn how to breathe without needing to be praised. Because if He elevates you before you disconnect from this need to be seen, you'll carry a weakness into your next season. A weakness that makes you vulnerable to manipulation. A weakness that makes you crave applause more than truth. A weakness that turns blessings into pressure because your value still depends on being validated. But when Allah isolates you, He's not withholding the blessing. He's protecting the barakah inside of it. He wants your soul to know, even when no one sees you, I do. Even when no one praises you, I accept you. Even when you feel unseen, your worth is not reduced. So He teaches you how to stand in the dark with dignity. He teaches you how to walk in silence. with sincerity. He teaches you how to show up every day without needing a spotlight to feel worthy. And that's when you begin to taste real strength, because your emotional stability is no longer tied to visibility. Your confidence no longer rises and falls with how many people respond. You stop living for the room and start living for the one who wrote your story before the room even existed. Now you're ready. Because the version of you that doesn't need to be seen can be trusted with anything. When people criticize you, remain steady. When people praise you, remain humble. When people forget you, you don't break. When people celebrate you, you don't change. You've become anchored, rooted in Allah, calm in silence, grateful in invisibility. And this is why He hid you. Because what's coming next, whether it's leadership, love, purpose, or legacy, it cannot be carried by someone still needing to be reminded that they matter. Allah doesn't want you stepping into the next chapter with insecurity. He wants you stepping in with certainty. The kind that no one gave you because only He could. So if you feel forgotten now, know that you are being freed. If you feel hidden now, know that you are being healed. And if you feel unseen now, know that you are being strengthened. Because soon you will walk into a moment that no one can take from you. And you won't need applause. You won't need attention. You won't need permission to shine. Because your worth will no longer be something you search for. It will be something you carry quietly inside your heart. That's what Allah was building in your isolation. And that's why He didn't let the world see you yet. Because when Allah finally reveals you, no one will be able to deny that it was Him all along. You've spent so long in silence, so long behind the scenes, so long wondering, when is it going to be my time? When will I finally be seen for who I truly am? You weren't waiting for fame. You weren't waiting for attention. You just wanted your effort to be recognized, your heart to be seen, your intentions to matter. And you kept telling yourself, maybe next season, maybe next opportunity, maybe next door. But each time you felt like it was finally about to happen, something would close, something would fall apart. Something would block the rise that felt so close, so real. And you started to wonder, is Allah even writing me into the story anymore? But He still is. And not just writing you into it. He's authoring a chapter so precise, so protected, that when it finally arrives, no one will be able to take credit except Him. Because the delay wasn't accidental. The silence wasn't wasted. The rejection wasn't meaningless. You see, if you had been elevated when you wanted, people would have assumed it was because of your talent, because of your skills, because of your image, because of your connections. But Allah wanted to make sure that when the moment came, when the gates opened, when the spotlight finally touched your name, it would be undeniable that it was from Him and not from anything the world could fabricate. He didn't want people saying, oh, of course they rose, they had support, they were lucky, they had all the resources. No, Allah isolated you, delayed you, hid you. So when He finally reveals you, even those who didn't believe in you will say, this wasn't them, this was Allah. Because the rise that He writes doesn't need marketing, doesn't need strategies, doesn't need validation. It just needs obedience in the dark and trust in the waiting. He took His time with you, so when you rise, it won't be just for your sake, it will be a reminder to others that Allah does not forget the ones who cry to Him in sujood. It will be a message to the silent hearts that were buried under the weight of their dreams, that yes, it's possible, that yes, Allah sees, that yes, What He hides, He also knows how to reveal at the exact moment it will carry the most impact, because your rise isn't just about you. It's about everyone watching, everyone who underestimated, everyone who walked away, everyone who thought your silence was your ending. And when Allah finally lifts the curtain, when He opens the path that no one saw coming, it will be so clear that this was never something you could have built alone. And that's the point. He didn't want you to build it. He wanted you to surrender, to trust, to wait, so that when the world sees what He does with your story, they won't admire your strength. They'll praise His mercy. They'll say, Subhanallah, look at what happens when Allah chooses someone and no one can stop it. That is what He's preparing you for. That is what the isolation was protecting. That is what the waiting was strengthening. So don't be ashamed of the silence. Don't regret the delays. Don't think the world forgetting you was a sign that Allah did too. Because He didn't. He was saving the unveiling for a moment that no one will be able to deny. Not even you. My brothers and sisters, when Allah isolates you, it's never to punish you. It's because He's protecting a version of you that this world isn't ready for yet. He's shaping you in silence, shielding you from what would have wounded you and strengthening you for what only you were chosen to carry. So don't let the quiet scare you. Don't let the delay make you doubt. And don't let your worth be measured by how seen you are in the eyes of people. Because when Allah finally reveals you, even the silence will testify that it was He who wrote your rise. May Allah give you peace in His timing, light in His delay, and strength in your private season. Ameen.